We are going to be chatting about the all-important letters of recommendation. Specifically, we're going to talk about how letters of recommendation fit into the law school admissions process. What you should know, who you should be asking, who you should not be asking, and finally, ways to make sure that you are collecting strong letters only. So why are we talking about letters of recommendation? Well, because we want to remind you that if you have not yet begun to explore your letters of recommendation, it's time, like right now, like today, because you need to get those asks in and you need to make sure that they are in right. I am Monique. I'm an associate law school consultant here at Montgomery Admissions Consulting. We specialize in working with first-generation and minority law school applicants, making the process smooth and fun and intentional. I support students through private consulting and law school admissions boot camps. And I'll just let you introduce yourself, Alice.
Hi, everybody. Like Monique said, I'm Alice Foley. I am the other associate law school consultant here at S. Montgomery. I've been doing law school admissions for about a decade. I started private consulting with the S. Montgomery team just a bit ago. And like Monique, I've got some private clients and we do one-on-one work. And then I also am teaching several law school application boot camps, which are just so much fun.
Now, Alice, let's talk about letters of recommendation. It's summer, the sun is shining, the beach is very close. Why are we talking about recommendations right now? It always feels like the easiest part, right? You just have to ask. So why is it important that we plan so far ahead for letters of recommendation? And what purpose do they serve for admissions officers in the application process?
Sure. So I'll start with the why now as opposed to later on. And honestly, it's kind of a respect thing. I mean, you are more than likely asking some professors, and the beginning of the school year is coming up real quick, and that gets to be kind of busy for them. And then before you know it, you like blink your eyes, and it's midterms, and they've forgotten. So if you start your asks right now, before school comes back into session, you've got it on their radar. Once school starts, you can check in. You're not just being obnoxious. And it gives them time to write a good letter for you. And to that second question, what do they do for the admissions committee? So I spent a lot of time reading applications for decision. That was a lot of my job when I was working as an admissions officer. And the letters of recommendation are one of my favorite and most useful things to read. So we're going to see a lot of information in the rest of your application process or your application parts. But what the letters of recommendation do is they give us a candid look at what somebody else is going to say about you. Most specifically, what your professors say about you. Because at the end of the day, law school is still school. And a lot of admissions committees have faculty members on them that will likely be your teachers once you join whatever law school it is. And they want to know how you're going to behave in their class. Are you engaged? Do you do good work? Do you come to office hours? Do you sit in the back and sleep? Do you ask good questions or questions that just hold up the class? And those are all things that we can find out from your letters of recommendation. I'll jump real quick to professional letters, kind of part and parcel of the same thing. We want to know how you work. Are you a good team member? Do you take initiative? All of those things are going to be helpful to me and to an admissions committee reader as we are trying to decide whether or not you would be a good fit for our law school class. So I went through sort of the why now and the why even we do them anyway. There are some people that you should ask and there are some people that you shouldn't ask. So Monique, can you tell us who would write a good letter and maybe who we should avoid?
Absolutely. I love this question, right? So when you're thinking and brainstorming, okay, now I know why I need to write or have a really strong letter of recommendation for my law school applications, right? This insight on like who you are inside the classroom from the people who know this best, you can think about who might have taught you. So folks will think, I need to get a letter from, the dean of my university because that name is going to be so significant and people are going to get so excited to see it. As an admissions officer, you will often come across folks telling you, substance over signature. And so when you're thinking about who to ask, don't think of the shiniest name at your institution. Don't think of the really well-known professor who you met for 30 minutes at a chat. Really think about, is there a professor? Is there a lecturer? Is there even a teaching fellow who has worked really closely with you? And that could be a professor who is very well regarded at your institution, but someone who has taught you and who knows your work style, who can speak to those academic skill sets that are being looked for in a letter of recommendation is going to be the best fit. So a lot of students have asked me in my time as an admissions officer, I can get a letter from my dean, would that help? And my question is always, have they taught you? Have they worked with you in an academic capacity? Often, deans aren't doing that because they're doing other dean things, which is great. And that leads me to my next point. Sometimes folks think about asking, a coach or an academic advisor. It's a similar thought. They will know you well in the context of maybe your leadership or, your experiences outside of the classroom, and they can say really wonderful things about you in that capacity. But when I'm looking to see how you overcome adversity in the classroom or what you contributed to classroom discussions, they might not have as large of a pool of information to pull from there. So really try to stick, when you are writing the academic letter, faculty who have taught you in the classroom and who you've built strong relationships with. Now, folks who have been out of the classroom for a while might say, well, my professor doesn't necessarily remember me. I have kept a mentorship relationship with XYZ folks, but I didn't really connect with my professors after I graduated. It is okay. Making sure to reach out and provide them with all the information and reminders of your time in the classroom. They are really used to writing these letters and being asked for things like this, and so they will be able to put together a letter with your reminders that will be helpful in the process. And again, they do have that academic background that will allow them to kind of talk more about the reading, the writing, which we would love to see.
When you have graduated a while ago, always check with your school, check the application directions specifically, but law schools understand that it's harder to maintain those relationships like 10, 15, 20 years out of college. And yes, we do get those people that apply to law school. They are just as good at it as our kiddos that come right out of college. But if you're worried, don't be. Check your application directions. A lot of the time, if graduated in the last 5 years, we definitely want an academic letter. If it's 5 to 10 years, we'd love one, but we understand that might not be the thing that you can get for us. And if you are ever in doubt, ask your admissions officers.
Absolutely.
I wish more people had asked me that question.
Yeah. I also think, right, just remembering that it is all in context, right? And so when I see that you graduated 15 years ago and you were able to get let's say you were able to get an academic letter of recommendation, if it doesn't have the same depth as someone who graduated last year, that doesn't mean that you weren't necessarily a strong student. It's just remembering the context outside of that letter as well. But we'll talk in a second about ways that you can help to make those letters stronger. And if you're getting a professional recommendation, that is awesome. We would love to see a recommendation from a current or recent employer, right? If you've been working for a while, what is sort of an updated lens on you in the professional setting? But we still want it to speak to those academic skill sets. So a supervisor who oversaw some substantial work that you've done, speaking about skill sets that could apply in the classroom, which are a lot of them. From there, Alice, I think another common question is, I found the recommenders, I found the right people to support me in this and to speak highly of me. Now, what do? Do I just ask and then hope for the best? Like, what are the ways that you can actually control this process? I'm going to start off with a few things that I think will be helpful, and then I would love to hear your take. So the first things first, in my time as an admissions officer, I would sometimes open a letter and get really excited, and then I would read through it and I would see that, wow, this person, this recommender might have wanted to say no. They may not have, and that's okay. Give them opportunity and space to say, I don't think I can write you the strongest letter. Do not push if they say that. I think that you should take their word for it, and truly, they will not hold back. That could be because they don't have enough time. It could be because they don't feel like they can accurately give you that strongest letter. There are a variety of reasons that folks may not be able to write you a letter, but once you get that answer, if it is leaning towards, I'm not totally sure, if they're not super enthusiastic, know that will show up in the letter. So start thinking about what other folks might be able to speak highly, because I have received and seen letters where I was like, I wonder if this person may have quietly kind of wanted to back away. And so asking for the letter of recommendation in a setting where you can get a sense for that interest, maybe it's giving them a call and saying, I'd love to, sending them a note first and trying jumping on a call, seeing what they think about writing you a letter, judging that pause maybe, seeing like if they sound super enthusiastic about it, because they should be. And from there, you should provide them with some context. A lot of folks write letters of recommendation but don't know exactly what they should be talking about. And so provide them with context and information about, I was in your class about 3 years ago and we learned about this, and this was what were my biggest takeaways. Here's this paper I wrote for you. You said it was awesome. Remind them of that, because they will search their memory and find those details for themselves, and somehow they'll end up in the letter. Those are my two sort of biggest pieces, but I would love to hear Alice's thoughts.
Absolutely. I cannot overstate the make it easy to say no thing. The wildest letters of recommendation that I have received from faculty wanted to say no but didn't. And I found myself in the same situation not too long ago. I co-teach a one credit class that is a lot of fun, but it's a one credit elective. And one of my students was applying to med school and a recommender fell through and she was like, would you write for me? And I said, I would love to, but I don't think I'm your best bet. And that's the other thing that you want to make sure that your faculty member knows is like, it's fine if they're outside your major, but if it was a class that was not necessarily not academically rigorous, but one where there's not a lot of those skills that we're looking for in law school and the skills that you're going to be able to use in law school, that may not be your best bet. And that's okay. And hopefully they are enthusiastic like I was. And I'm like, yes, I would love to, but I should not. I'm not going to add helpful things to your application. I can tell them that you were wonderful and that you were super engaged, but I'm guessing that PhD programs don't want to hear that we talked about books for a semester. With that in mind, the other thing that I want to make sure that I remind you of, and I touched on it a little bit at the beginning, is that you want to give them time. Because if somebody is super excited to write you a strong letter of recommendation, sometimes that takes a bit. I know in my time, I definitely saw letters from the same faculty members that have a template, and that's okay. They filled in the important bits at the end, and a lot of the letter was pretty much done. And then they would fill in the pertinent things about each student that they wrote for. And that's fine. If the professor has a letter, great. If they don't, it is going to take them a minute to write you a good letter. And most of the time when they're writing for you, they want to make sure that they are helping your application process. So when you are asking ideally, it is going to give you a chance to check in with them. It's going to give you a little bit of cushion if you want to apply early in the law school admission cycle, which is huge. And it's also just going to, take a little bit of the stress out of it. So you're not panicked. They're not panicked. Everyone is really excited to be part of the whole process. And typically, when someone is not stressed out about writing something, they typically are nicer. They're going to have the space to explore the things that you were doing in class and say all of the wonderful things that they want to say about you, rather than just the first four that come to mind in the 3 hours that they have to write it over the course of a month. The other thing is to make sure that you are making yourself available. It's been about 1 million years at this point. But when I was collecting my own letters of recommendation for law school, I had a professor who was thrilled to write for me, but kept forgetting. And finally, at the end of the day, was like, I need you to just come sit in my office. Like, you can do work. I don't care. I just need you to be in my vision. So I will write this. And every now and again, they have a question. What was the name of that class? Do you remember what your paper title was? Were you part of this particular project? And it's handy if you're right there to answer that question. For me, if you are trying to maintain a bit of control in the letters of recommendation process, it's definitely giving them as much time as you possibly can and making sure that you are making yourself available to them for further information, that you are just as excited about this and you are just as grateful to them, and you make that very clear. One last thing. This is not really a control piece, but it's just a good advice. Write thank you notes when they're done. Tell them thank you in some kind of on paper way, not just an email. I know it's crazy, but send a note. Campus mail works. You can probably find their address. Send them a thank you note. It will make a ton of difference.
Absolutely. And I think nurturing that relationship also, Alice, I think you bring up a really great point that, right, you are asking this faculty for a letter, one, because they did teach you and they can help you in this process, but because you value their perspective. And you, right, you want someone who you think highly of, who thinks highly of you. And so continue that relationship. Keep them posted. When you move forward towards law school, keep that connection. You're going to need more letters of recommendation as the future rolls forward. And right, being able to keep those mentorship relationships, not just because of those letters, but because it's important to build community and have a task force. That's what my mentors call it. Letters of recommendations are just a sort of a symbol of how many folks are in your corner, and that's really meaningful too. So I love that advice. Write the thank you note, and also, feel that gratitude, and also, those pieces are really important too as you reflect on next steps. I want to sort of close out with, are there any other really excellent best practices and things that come to our mind from our time working in the law school admission space? We're looking at letters of recommendation that we highly recommend, that folks do, that folks should absolutely avoid.
I think we've gone over a lot of the things that students should do, or that applicants should do. I do want to point out one thing, and I only say this because it happened when I was still an admissions officer. Don't write your own letter of recommendation, please. Please don't do that to me. I'm going to be confused. Don't ask your family members or your neighbors. Monique touched on it earlier. We want we want academic, we want professional experience, we want those skills. It is really wonderful. I'm sure you're a lovely human. I really do. And I'm sure that your parents think you're great. I'm sure that the neighbor down the way who happens to be a judge is great, or they happen to be a practicing attorney is great. And this was that signature, substance over signature thing too. All they're going to tell me is that you're a really wonderful human. And again, that is great, but it's not what I'm looking for in those letters of recommendation. I assume that you are a pretty great human because you are embarking on what is a time consuming and expensive journey sometimes, ideally with the plan to become an attorney who helps us keep our civilization together in a lot of ways. So that makes me believe that you are a pretty decent human.
Also, think about what else your application is sharing, right? We know you're awesome. I read your personal statement. Chef's kiss. It was great. I want to know more about, right, what a faculty member or what a supervisor has to say about you. That piece, they can tell me all the things that you told me, but I want to hear the things that you can't tell me, right? What you were like as a student from the perspective of a teacher, right? Thinking about the who will be reading about, thinking about your audience there. And also, another tidbit I will add is sometimes, right, you're thinking about, well, how many people am I asking? That was another point that I really want to drill down on. Some law schools will require, I've seen law schools that require one letter. I have seen law schools that require two. That's more common. Generally, the max is 4. Some law schools, the max is 3. It depends on the law school, so look at that. Do not send more or less than required or limited, because following directions is important. Then also, I got the advice from a former mentor in admissions, an associate director. He once told me about letters of recommendation, more is not better. Better is better. So think about, as you're collecting your recommendations, what does the full story that they tell? You have a letter from a professor who can speak to that critical writing. You have a second letter maybe that speaks even more to maybe a different side of your academic journey, or when you struggled in a class but you really put in that extra work. What insights are these letters giving? And when you get to that third letter, what is left to be said and who will say it well? Maybe that is a professional rec. Maybe that is that you have 2 awesome letters, and a third one, you don't know if there's anything new that a third recommender can add. That's okay. If I get a third letter and it's not as strong as the other 2, I now have questions that weren't there at the end of the second letter. I'm like, well, what happened here, right? Don't do that to me. Don't seed that doubt. So think about the quality and the significance of each of your letters as well.
It's true. You got to read the directions, and don't try to sneak in extra letters of recommendation. Don't do that. Don't like hide them at the bottom of your personal. I've seen this too. Don't hide them at the bottom of your personal statement. An extra couple of pages. Don't send them to me after the fact via email.
Don't do it.
Don't read the directions.
Do what is instructed. Yes, absolutely, right? Like one of the big things I'm going to take away from the end of your application is, did they complete the assignment as instructed? That's a really big part. So even with the letters of recommendation, more is not necessarily better. Sometimes I'll get a third letter or fourth letter of recommendation, like a letter that is beyond the limit, and it won't be strong. And I'm like, well, first of all, you broke the rules, and now it's not right. Like we didn't even hit a home run. So keep that in mind as well. I love that. I just want to thank Alice so much for being the best colleague ever and joining me today. And as I mentioned, you can find more advice on our website, as well as in our free guide to applying to law school. Check that out on our website as well. And we can't wait to see you next week.